So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Me for Matters. So I think everyone knows we took a short break for summer, but here we are, and looking out the window, it looks like we brought the sun with us. So thanks for everyone for joining. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Liam Mullins from the Seven Stars, and I guess on behalf of Media for All, just welcome you all for joining today. Now, Media for All was set up in 2018 by Naren, who brilliantly we've got on a call today. And the whole aim of Media for All is to help recruit, retain people from Black, Asian and other minority ethnic communities to the advertising industry. One of our other big focuses is once people are here, we know, and we've heard on this call time and time again, that people's lived experience, if you're not from a white traditional background, is very different. So one of the things we're really focused on is helping people of colour to really rise within their careers. Now, we really believe that part of that driving that change and keeping momentum happening is to have a platform for real open discussion and conversation. I've talked about, being from real mixed parentage, that sometimes I'm not sure the right language to use or how to talk about race myself. And if I don't, what we really felt we needed was a platform where people could ask questions without fear of saying the wrong thing or anything like that. So this is a real safe space, and that's the whole reason why we created the Me for Matters webinar series. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about today is there's been lots and lots of positive action in the wake of George Floyd's murder and everything that we've seen around BLM. And a lot of businesses have woken up to the scale of the challenge that we face in making our industry truly anti-racist. And we know that the Creative Equals open letter, the Adelante Commit, was signed by over 200 CEOs, and there have been some real positive signs and new initiatives introduced. But frustratingly, we also know that's not the case for every organisation. And it's definitely not the experience of people of colour throughout the industry holistically. And that's something that we need to keep a massive eye on. So we recently launched a survey, and I know Steph's going to talk about something that she's, the guys over at Creative Equals going to launch later on in the session. But we launched a survey of over 60 Me for role models from over 50 different advertising organisations. And this is where I get a bit annoyed and pull a funny face, but frustratingly, we are seeing action. But what we're seeing is that impact is really, really mixed, and that's really quite sad. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Only 60% of members surveyed said that they'd seen senior leaders stepping up and taking action against racism in the workplace. Now, we can take some balance in that and say 6%, it's more than half, that's good news. But that also means it says 40% of organisations who sign that letter that are not seeing any visible, any significant change at all. And that's really frustrating. Another really worrying stat was that we've only seen a third of organisations are not witnessing any encouragement of their leaders and line managers to check in with their Black colleagues. And again, we know the massive amount of pressure that we put on our Black teams who work for us in the immediate aftermath. And, we ask them to step up and talk about their experience. We ask people to get involved, but we're not seeing any more check-ins and how are people feeling and how people doing. And there's some really simple things that we've talked about that make that possible and make a massive difference. And the last stat is that less than half of people are seeing their organisations make any changes to increasing diversity at all levels, not just at entry levels. So on one hand, there is stuff happening, there's good stuff going on, but we're not seeing it universally across all organisations. And I genuinely believe we're not seeing it happening fast enough, and there is a lot more to be done. So today we're joined by some fantastic guests, and they're going to talk about a lot of things in relation to some of these stats I've talked about, but also, some of the initiatives they are seeing taking place and some of the positive things that are happening. But also we're going to talk a little bit about what to do if you're sat in an organisation, you're going, hang on a minute, my boss signed that letter, but I've not seen anything happen. I've not seen any change, and I'm still massively, massively frustrated. So we're going to talk about a bit of that too. Now, one of the things we talk about, and we partner with NABS on this, is that, we really, really want this webinar, this session to be a safe space. So if anyone needs any emotional support, if they're triggered in any way following what we talk about, our friends at NABS have a brilliant advice line. It's opening to anyone in the industry. So the details are in the chat box, so please feel free to get in touch with those guys. So I think it's nearly enough from me today. I thought I would just very quickly introduce our guests. So firstly, we have Steph Matthews, and Steph from Creative Equals, as I say. And Creative Equals really lit that touch paper within the ad industry to really call to arms leaders to sign an open letter and to stand committed to doing something together. Steph's also was the president of Bloom for 2019 and is one of WACL's future leaders. So thanks for joining us, Steph. Joining Steph, we have the inimitable, I wrote that down, I struggled to say it, Matt Goff, or Goffey. He's the CEO at Adam and Eve, and he's leading the change that's happening in that organisation. Now, Goffey spent precisely the same amount of time at Adam and Eve, and I've been at Seven Stars. He's a real creative genius and is a force for good within that network. So thanks for joining us, Goffey. We also have two people who are no strangers to Me for Matters. We have Naren, who we talk religiously about being the godfather of the outdoor industry. And he's also, as I've already said today, the founding father of Media for All and an absolute force in driving us all forward in what we're trying to do. So thanks for joining us, Naren. And the remarkable Colette. So Colette is founder of award-winning brand consultancy Brand by Me, and she's brilliant and has been a huge driver of Me for Matters. And honestly, this thing wouldn't get out if Colette wasn't as committed to helping us make it happen as she is. So thank you everyone for joining today. If you've got questions as we're going through, please pop them in the question chat box down below in the Q&A. And what we'll do as we're going on, we'll answer them as the right moment comes up. And if not, our guys here today have agreed to stay on for 10 or so minutes at the end to get through as many questions as we have. So that's it from me. I'm going to start off, Steph, with you. I've got a question, so thanks again for joining us. So in immediate aftermath, you guys at Creative Equals were real, you're real leaders. You jumped and you rallied together a huge amount of different organisation people behind signing that open letter. I guess, what were you hoping that would happen in an immediate short term beyond the signature? And also, what were you hoping for in terms of that long-term change?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's great to be on. Yeah, when you're kind of talking about the letter, that kind of takes me back. I think it was like 4 months ago, and it was kind of quite a dark period for everyone, including my colleagues at Creative Equals. And working with Michael Brown from London, we kind of kick-started off the letter, but really we were just a kind of facilitator. We worked with people across the sector, including yourselves. We consulted with a number of Black talent, because trying to get something like that off the ground and ensure that it covers off everything that we wanted to cover off at the time was quite hard. And I think really the driver or the catalyst for why that came about at the time was really about, we felt that we needed to show solidarity, and we needed to bring the sector together to support our Black talent when it felt like really society felt Black talent were invisible. And we wanted to really show that they are visible and that they have a voice. So I guess that was the initial kind of short-term objective. And by kind of engaging with senior leaders, engaging with CEOs, we thought that would be a way that we could kind of show our Black talent in agencies, in Adland, in our media owners, that there was a commitment to Black talent, that they were supported, that they were heard, and I guess, yeah, that there was support and commitment to stamp out, really, which is systemic racism. But that's not like a short-term fix. That's not an overnight fix. And I know, Liam, you're talking about, well, what's Adland done in 3 months? Like it's hard. Like not all of the commitments that are in that letter can be achieved over 3 months. We're talking about dismantling systems of oppression that have been in place for years, and that kind of work is long-term.
Yeah.
So I guess from a long-term perspective, what we're hoping we could do with the letter was really kind of ignite agencies to look at the systems that are in place in their agency, look to try and kind of help them dismantle that, and look to show how they can really be committed to long-term change. Because as you kind of quite rightly pointed out, I think at the start, you want to make sure that this isn't just a PR commitment. And that is something we heard. I think at the start we had 200 people sign up. We now have over 500 plus CEOs, senior leaders from the UK and also in the States that have committed to this. So our responsibility also is to ensure that we hold everyone that has signed that letter accountable, because we don't want it to be a PR thing. And so that's why off the back of that, we have just launched the accountability survey. So that launched at our CEO forum last week, which is our session for everyone that signed up to that letter, where we kind of talk about ways that they can embed those actions. But we really want to be able to quantifiably kind of track their progress on these actions and understand what the challenges are, so that we can all work together to kind of help people on this journey, because it is a journey. Everyone can have these good intentions about wanting to kind of drive this change, but it's going to be hard because it's inbuilt, it's systemic. So, you know, you've got it. Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, but with this letter, we're hoping that we can help Adland to really kind of help them create this change.
Thanks, Steph. And, you know, I think it's absolutely a fair, not even a pushback, but it's a fair statement to say, you know, change takes time. And I guess you're quite right. And, you know, having you guys holding or helping hold the, you know, that group of people to account, I think is hugely beneficial. And I think it's how do we track and monitor the change? Because I guess it's important to feel that you know you're feeling that sense of change, and you know as an individual from Black community or from you know someone from a non-white community, really understanding what that means for you, I think is how we have to try and start making people get a sense of what that means, because you want to feel that there isn't this stasis. You want to feel that it is pushing forward. So I think it's something that we've talked about quite a lot on here, which is like, what are the markers for movement? Because if everyone published their, you know, their pay gap today, there'd be outcry because it's obviously awful, right? So rather than measure the pay gap, what can we measure that is moving forward, and how can we keep that going? And Goffey, I don't know whether that's something you've started to think about over an Adam and Eve. You know, what I guess also thinking about what Steph's point is, what is the short-term impact, and how do you balance that alongside the long-term expectation from your team around you?
He's on silent.
You're on silent, Goffey. Sorry, it's only been 5 months.
Silent for a moment. I think that the letter and all the events, you know, that happened 4 months ago. I think hopefully it gave people in our organisation the expectation to be heard, and I think that was probably a really important starting point. If you signed that letter, then the people of colour in your organisation should expect you to listen to their experience, and so. Certainly the bedrock of what we've done so far as an agency has been based in what we heard and what we learned from listening to the experiences of people of colour who work in the agency. I think, like lots of agencies, we would have said before that we were trying hard to create change, but I think a lot of that change was change from without. Can we recruit from different places, and can we recruit different people? Can we feature different people in our work, and can we use different people to make that work? But that's all change from without the agency, and certainly having heard from the experiences of people of colour in our agency, the first thing that we learned was, my God, we have got a far bigger problem internally than we could have imagined that we've had. And these phrases about systemic racism or systematic problems, that's not somebody else's organisation that's happening, and that's happening in our organisation. And so we've got to really focus on creating change from within as well as the change from without. So that was a huge starting point for us, and we've been very lucky in the openness and the honesty of the people of colour in our agency coming in and talking to us as a management team. And then I think that the second part of that was the importance of acknowledging our shortcomings of the past. Have we done enough on creating equality in the organisation in the past? No. Okay, well, now is the moment, now is a line in the sand where within the corporate world, people can come and say, we don't think you've done enough and we aren't being heard. And we say, okay, all right, well, this is the moment. We can't go back from here. Let's not beat ourselves up about the past, but let's acknowledge where we are and let's set ourselves a target. Let's get out on the journey. You know, I think that letter gets us all on the starting line and says, okay, you're standing there, you've got to go on this journey, and it's about time that you put more effort into creating that change from within. You talked about recruit, retain and rise. We've got amazing stats about the people that we've recruited over the course of the last 2 years. And we've got some terrible stats about the people that we've retained over the last 2 years. But I think that, you know, that moment, that line in the sand, that letter gives us a moment by which we go, okay, from here on in, we're going to have to be open. We're going to be honest. We're going to be transparent about our statistics. We're going to acknowledge our shortcomings of the past. And we're going to work together to try and make this better. Not necessarily with initiatives. You know, there's loads of initiatives in this space. I don't think that we need initiatives. If we've got systemic racism, then we need systemic change. And that means taking this right to the heart of the organization and setting out to try and put things right.
Cheers, Goffey. And I'm just thinking, based on what you've just said, we've had a really good question already from Jay here, which is, you know, that I guess linking to your point about retention and thinking a bit about Jay's question specifically is, how do you plan to promote that talent of colour? How do you make sure we create a disproportionate amount of impact more immediately than perhaps doing it organically is? And is there anything that you put in place around that is kind of leaning into it?
Yeah, for sure. I think recruitment is one of the big areas that we've looked at. I know that sounds like sort of bringing people in from outside, but as a relatively young agency, we're only 12 years old. We've grown up without proper processes in place with recruitment. We still do things on a kind of, well, I know him and she knows her, and perhaps we could bring that person in over there. But I think opening up our recruitment process for every job at every level will really give us the opportunity to look at the candidates that we've got internally, and if we're going to make jobs open for everybody to see them, then we're going to have to have a look across. Okay, well, what talent have we already got here? And maybe we've already got the person that's right for that job, but we don't normally look at them, or we don't normally look around and see who might be able to fill that role. So I think that will open up, and opening it up to everybody, they'll be able to see there's an opportunity there. They'll be able to come and say, I think I'm ready for that. And that forces us to then have a conversation with them about, okay, yeah, I think you're a candidate for that. Or actually, I don't think you are quite ready for that. But if you're not quite ready for that, here are the reasons why, and here's what you might want to work on, so that the next time a job comes up at this level, you are ready, and we can promote you into it.
I think the language of openness. Steph, you had a point to add into that?
Yeah, just with that, we've also created a program called Accelerate. My colleague Lydia Anwar has created that, and I know the MIFA crew have been part of that speed mentoring program, but specifically to address the fact that, that there, we say that there aren't people of colour, there isn't that talent pool there to rise them to the top. And we have created a training program specifically for people of colour at mid-level. It's a leadership program that is tailored for them. So with the results of our quality standard, we were able to see exactly what skills they needed, our people of colour versus their white counterparts, and tailor the program to it. So essentially, it's a springboard. We've got a fast track program of people of colour that are ready to be progressed to the top of the business when that kind of position arises. So Matt, having programs like that allow you just visibility to kind of see, well, this is a person here that has been trained, they're a person of colour, and they are now ready for that role.
Yeah, I really like what both of you said there. I think, Matt, your point about it being more open, it being, as an organisation taking more responsibility to ensure that everybody knows what the opportunities that are out there. One of the things we hear quite a lot is that people still don't feel confident that they can be right for that job. And I think things like mentoring that we do as part of what we do as MIFA, Steph, the initiative you just talked about around Accelerate, I think making people feel that they can put their hands up, they will be noticed, they will be seen. In a world of systemic issues, I think that is, you've got to come at it from both angles, I guess. Colette, thinking about yourself, and one of the things we've talked about is, yes, there are, Matt said it himself already, there's a lot of initiatives. What we don't need is a long list of more initiatives and stuff. If you're sat in an organisation today where you're not seeing that change, or you're not even hearing, off they've gone, they've signed a letter, off they go, but you're not witnessing anything, what can you do as an individual? We get this asked every single week when we do these sessions. How do I challenge my boss? How do I ask that question? How do I put my hand up? Will I look like I'm making a nuisance? All that sort of stuff. How practically can people start to call this out and make a difference?
I think, it's a really, really good question. And I think we get asked it every time. And honestly, my answer to it every time maybe slightly shifts or changes just based on kind of where we are. I think what's really useful, so there's a couple of things that probably three things that I've seen people do, and where people have, people that I've seen in my network where that's happened has worked. I think we cannot underestimate the impact of collective power, which means that if you are a lone voice or one of few in your agency, you need to reach out to others from other agencies who are doing, and that's where visibility and transparency around what we're doing really helps. So quite often people, we can't share anything, we're just doing it inside, we're working on ourselves. And I'm like, actually, we need to surface what we're doing so that agencies that are a bit further behind, so that people within agencies that are a bit further behind can point to change and progress that's happening and say, actually, why don't we try this? I think and that starts by, I think, it starts by us maybe not being afraid to speak up if we feel comfortable, and if we don't, it's finding advocates and allies that can speak up for us, whether that's within our organization, whether that's actually coming to MIFA and finding a mentor who can help you navigate through this, whether it's said, you know, suggesting joining programs like the Creative Equals one that's been mentioned. We at Brand by Me have been doing some work on sort of personal brand for individuals. And what we've been able to do is look at personal brand through three lenses, actually. One is personal brand for people of color, because actually there's a whole thing around to keep your head down, do your work, get noticed. If I speak out, I'm pigeonholed as difficult, having to code switch to fit in. This is the kind of behavior that we need to first stop so that people can feel free. And I love what Matt was saying, people feel free to have open conversations where they're listened to. That's not always the case. The second level is at an ally level. It's looking at our personal brands and going, how can we be better allies based on who we are? And that's a really good thing. And this third level is a leadership level, is what does this mean in leaders, and kind of building in kind of anti-race into that. So it starts to help people understand their individual responsibility, because what I think quite often, people will inadvertently act as blockers. People will act as blockers and gatekeepers without even realizing it, and that directly stops people feeling like they can go and, you know, and challenge and be heard. What else in terms of kind of individuals? But what I would say, I know it's hard. The other thing I would say, and this is it, I think this is where the power of, I said, collective power. So whether it's really making sure that actually if you have an employee network, that you are using it as a force for change, and that you are equipping and having conversations with your members that are equipping people to do this. You know, I heard a lovely phrase on a thing we did at Futures yesterday. We had an anti-racism roundtable, and somebody said, this is about not just celebrating Black culture, this is about celebrating Black lives. And we can be, you know, the lives of people of color. And I think there's a fundamental difference here. If we're doing that, and actually as employee networks, if we're recognizing our role in equipping our members, allies, and people of color to actually be effective in calling for change, and we're coming together as a movement, that will also really help. I work a lot in the charity sector, and we have been doing some work. I've been working with an organization called Charity So White, looking at how we can turn employee networks into actual campaigners, and really looking at that kind of force for change, because I think that collective action for me becomes really important. It's often easy to feel like we're the lone voice. You know, one of you, oh, it's just me and my organization, no one else feels the same. I'm going to guarantee that isn't true, and say that actually do reach out and try and find people that are. And if you don't know how to do that, then as I said, get a MIFA mentor to help you, because we're really good at navigating this stuff, and we have lots of experience between us.
Yeah, thanks, Colette. And I would definitely encourage anyone who's struggling. I feel like there are more, you know, maybe it's something that we need to signpost more on our own website, but I think there are more opportunities to reach out and speak to people who give you time right now to help you navigate some of those situations than ever before. And I think Naren's managed to pull together 75 plus mentors from a MIFA perspective, not to mention all these other organisations and people that you've heard about already today. So I think if you're struggling with any of it, just ask a question. It doesn't have to be long and, you know, 12 months of discussion. It can be actually, I'm just struggling with this, what's your view? And that's what networks are absolutely there for.
And I think there's something as well, and it was one of the stats that we highlighted in terms of, I guess there's something, and it's what Matt said again, is that agencies taking their, and I would put a shout out to agency leaders to say, actually, it's really important that we are starting with the lived experiences of people of colour. And if you haven't done that today, don't just shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, not a priority. Now is the time to start today. It's never too late to start this, but actually live it, starting from the experience, the lived experience of people of colour. And Matt said, having those very uncomfortable conversations and not expecting, not waiting, well, we haven't heard anything from, you know, our 2 Black people in the agency. Not good enough. You should be seeking out that. And if people don't feel like they can come to you, there is a reason. You should also be looking for lived experiences broader where they're shared, because sometimes your own people may not feel comfortable. I heard this with an organisation that I'm about to start working with to do some listening exercises. At the moment, the people of color within that organization do not feel comfortable sharing their experiences. And what the leadership have unfortunately done is listen to the experiences maybe of a few people whose experience have been way positive, which is excellent, but not characteristic of maybe the broader piece. So actually, as leaders, we do need to take responsibility and ownership for this yet again.
I think also to that as well, I think there's also the fear of, we're in a market now where potentially there are job losses, there are redundancies, there are restructuring. So as a person of colour, you may feel uncomfortable going to an agency leader, expressing concerns about how the business has been run, because, at the end of the day, your job might be on the line, and, we all have bills to pay. We all kind of, that is going to be a prime motivator, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is where I say, actually, it's why you have to seek out people older, wiser than you, and mentorship to help you navigate these. Because honestly, I'll be one of them. I have been burnt by this before, but I have learned how to navigate and have these conversations appropriately, because I have been burnt and penalized in my earlier career for having bold conversations. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have them, but there are ways people will help you with ways to introduce that and have those conversations, and not be the Lone Ranger that sticks your head up only to have it cut off, that sort of thing. No one wants that. We have to, there are too few of us in the industry already. We can't have people being booted out because they've spoken out. That's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
You know what? I'm sorry, Steph.
Absolutely not. We have a retention problem as it is. So, we need people of colour to, raise their voices and make a stand.
Absolutely. And Colette, you mentioned older and wiser, and I realise we haven't heard from the oldest and wisest on the panel so far, unusually after 29 minutes. So Naren, I guess there's a couple of things. We've got a question here from Pelly around leadership and around what's being done at board level. But one of the things I kind of wanted to ask, and this is not me making a comment on age, there's been a lot in the press about that recently, but I guess you've probably witnessed this issue bubbling up and down for a good few years, and it being the thing to talk about and then it disappearing because something else important. How can we keep this at the front of everyone's mindset at the moment, and what do we need to do? Answering Pelly's question here, what do we need to do to make sure that change is happening at board level?
Well, I think fundamentally, we've only got 7% of our respondents saying nothing was happening, right? So at least, you've got some people not answering, but nearly 80% of people saying diversity and inclusion is becoming part of their corporate agenda, right? And that's positive. I think we've also got to step back and go, we're in the middle of a pandemic, revenues getting hammered, so for organizations, to balance, this, we've got to kind of, at least there are organizations like Matt's who are doing good work, and we've got to make sure we applaud them. And I think the fundamental thing, it's around, encouragement. How can we get more leaders to come into the open and talk about their programs and how the impact they're creating, and also their staff going, wow, the difference is amazing. It'd be great if we could have people like Campaign, putting awards on diversity in terms of programs that people have created. We're lucky we've got Black History Month, so you know what, we're going to have another month of this being part of the topic. But I do worry about it post that, and I think it's going to be people like us and Steph who are going to continue to push organizations. I do think long term, I think it is going to be, unless you embrace it, and I always, you've heard me say this is really hard, in an odd way. I'm glad I'm not running an organization having to deal with this, because these are tough problems to solve, particularly kind of increasing your workspace with more diverse people, but it's got to happen, so I think, we need Campaign, we need all the organizations out there to continue to push this, with us along the way. And, we're going to be releasing a press release on our survey. Hopefully it gets picked up. Creative Equals will continue to push the leaders. But I think we all like to be successful with programs, whether it's winning awards or, winning new business. And I think diversity needs to be become like that within the media landscape, where it needs to be celebrated, because that's when people aspire to be more like them.
Yeah. And Naren, I totally agree with you, right? So on one side you've got celebrate it, make it, make it unmissable, and then I think you've got another side of it. And Matt, I've got a bit of a question for you within this, which is around, people say a principle's only a principle if it costs you money, right? And I guess one of the questions that Dino, a fellow Me for Role Models, asked is, Goffy, are your clients asking you, have they noticed what you're doing? Are they seeing what you're saying? Because one of the things that we've been challenged on is actually, should we be swaying money from supplier X to supplier Y? Should we be making sure we're only investing in partners who meet our definition of anti-racism and all of that thing? I guess, Goffy, from running a huge successful organisation, well, I should add, as Adam and Eve, how do we make clients hold us more accountable?
Yeah, just a couple of different bits in there. I think in terms of it
Sorry, it usually is with me.
In terms of it being a principle, and I think it was Bernbach. It's a famous Bernbach quote. At least we've certainly attributed it to Bernbach in our network, even if it isn't. Like, if you don't make this a principle and a core part of who you are as an organization, A, it's going to cost you money. B, it's going to cost you time. C, it's going to be really, really hard, right? There are the three inescapable truths about these conversations and making progress in this space. So if it's not at the heart and the core of what you're trying to achieve, there are only so many reasons for you to slow down on your journey or for you to stop. So if you don't bake that into either who you are as a leader or what you want your organization to be, progress is just going to be like too difficult. So in terms of budget, this stuff is going to cost money sometimes. So we're going to have to commit to that costing us some money. And yes, times are hard, but there are budgets to enter awards. There are budgets to enter so many creative awards. Some of them we never heard of them, but we're still paying to enter them. But like, okay, but if this has become one of our principles and one of our important things, then let's look at where we're spending that budget currently and let's reassign that. So we've been through a big exercise to do that and look at exactly where are we currently spending money, where we ought to now spend it on one of our principles. And in terms of our clients reacting to our journey to some degree. I think our journey so far has largely been an internal one. We want to make sure that we are setting off in the right direction and doing things right before we talk about this too broadly. But yes, clients are reaching out, and they're either saying, okay, how is this going to impact us and where are we going to see this come up in the work that we're making? And that's good. Or they're saying, great, we've had a response to this and we're now adopting these principles. Can you work with these principles within what you're trying to achieve? The answer to which is yes, of course, we'll work with whatever you've got. Or they're saying, do you know what? We're quite small in our organization. We seem a long way away from the leadership of it. It doesn't seem to be something that's discussed. You guys are obviously having this conversation and you're discussing it with your staff and more people are talking about it. Can we get involved? Because otherwise we're not having conversations of this nature and we don't have the language. And so we want to hear from you and we want to talk about it, because otherwise we're not going to make any progress. So some clients are leaning in. We did a survey of whether or not our clients had responded on Blackout Tuesday, just to see how many of them had made any mention of Black Lives Matter. It's in and around 50% of clients who'd made any reference to it. Lots of work still to do for sure.
Yeah, and I think actually, sorry, Colette, I'll come to you. I think the one thing I would say is, I think where agencies are fantastic is really showing leadership towards their clients and dragging them to where they necessarily don't want to be because it's uncomfortable or difficult. And I think if we can do that around these issues, I think we can make a disproportionate amount of impact. Colette, I know that's something that you do a bit of in your organisation. I didn't know if you wanted to add to that. Sorry, I noticed your hand up.
Yeah, I did. On two levels. I love exactly what Matt's just said in terms of, I'm sorry, I can't bring myself to call you Goffy. I'm really sorry. I don't do nicknames. I'm a very first name, last name person.
You don't have to apologise for that. I'm sorry for having a silly name.
That's exactly the same thing that we're seeing. And we've said it, Steph's put into the chat, we need to bake it into our DNA. One of the bits of work that we've been doing at Brand by Me is saying, how do you build anti-racism into your brand, into your core strategy? Which means actually from the get-go, rather than seeing it as a program and a project you need to deliver on the side, let's look at across our people, our clients, our processes, our partners, and our structures, and look across absolutely how do we embed anti-racism as a mindset, as a principle, as an action across all of these things. And that starts by, looking at your brand DNA, looking at your strategy. And, we often as agencies, sometimes we can look to brand side, literal client side brands to think of themselves as brands, but actually as agencies, we should do too. So we've done at Brand by Me, admittedly it's easier for us because there's 4 of us, but we did this exercise ourselves to look at actually where do we need to intervene, and then how can we bake it into our work. And I think that sense of agencies needing to demonstrate leadership for clients, but also not waiting for your clients to ask. If your clients are asking you to do this, it is too late and you will lose the work. If your clients are saying, well, the minute and we've seen this time and time again as an industry in other areas where we've needed to change, actually in broader diversity, not specific to race, where we haven't been doing this, we lose pitches, we lose work, and actually as an industry, we come under fire. We can't wait for clients to be asking this. We need to be demonstrating. I love what you said, demonstrating leadership and showing. And actually then that, I said about we can't underestimate the kind of collective power, that kind of client agency partnership in sharing. We've got these, here's our anti-racist policy. Here's yours. Can you take these supplier guidelines? Yes, absolutely fine. Can you adopt this stuff? And really that helps us progress. Progress will be way quicker if we can do this. So, rather than sitting back and waiting for our clients to ask us to do this, we should be proactively looking at ways that we can bring them and involve them in this as well and make it part of who we are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think we are, 7 Stars, we've got as far to go as everybody else, right? But there are things we're doing with our clients now, which you can see real appetite and I think be the change a little bit, right? Steph, I'm conscious of time. I've question around you I don't know if I'm unfairly asking you about stats here, but it's a big question, and I guess if we make it less about the numbers, more about the sentiment, the cynic in me says, make all our entry-level people more representative, and eventually it will all catch up and it'll be fine. And I guess what is out there around the proportion of people at the entry-level media professions versus more mid-stage or high-level, because my sense is that it of course is easier to make change at the bottom, but where we can make meaningful changes slightly further up. And that sounds horrifically hierarchical, but the truth is that people entering the industry need to look up and see people of colour who that they can aspire to be and who they can see have great experiences and time and stay within the industry. So I don't know, Steph, what's your thoughts on that? Have you got any?
Yeah, I've got a few stats because you put it in the chat box so everyone knows that. So I pulled out some stats, but we know from our quality standard data that 97% of CEOs in the sector are white. We know that across the workforce that 14% are from Black, Asian or multi-ethnic background. And what I don't have to hand is the entry level, but I do know that it is much broader, because it is a lot easier to kind of work on these diverse talent pipeline programs. But as we were talking about earlier on, I think Matt was saying the challenge is retention. It's one thing to kind of bring diverse talent in, but if you haven't educated the business on how to deal with difference, so how to manage people that aren't like you, that's when your diverse talent will leave. And that's where the challenges are. That's why we see the microaggressions, because we have uncomfortable conversations, we have silence, and that just builds this divide. And your talent do leave. I do actually have some stats here that I would love to talk through, things that we found. So we found that our Black, Asian, minority ethnic talent are twice as likely than white colleagues to have experienced or witnessed inappropriate behaviour at work. That our multicultural talent are more likely to be looking to leave their company in 2 years, and that's almost double that of white men. And only 6 in 10 Black, Asian, multi-ethnic women were selected versus 8 in 10 white men to work on a big project or pitch. And we find that big project or pitch is indicative of career progression, because we're talking about visibility. We're talking about when that next leadership role comes up, who can we put in this place? Who's worked on that project? So, that's why we have this retention challenge. So I don't think the problem is bringing talent in. I think the problem is retaining them and ensuring that they're ready to be accelerated to the top.
Thanks,
Clear.
Steph. Just to follow up,
So one of the things we find with most mentees coming to Media for All is around confidence. You know, you generally, and I'm not saying every ethnic minority has issues with confidence, but you know, a lot of people have been knocked throughout their career, their lives, bullied in school, called names. And I think the fundamental thing people need to realize is, if you're one of those people and things go against you, whether it's a promotion or you've pitched an idea, they have an extra excuse in their head, which is it because of who I am, right? And I think the key thing leaders, managers in all organizations need to do is give better feedback, right? So when things don't go well for your talent, your ethnic talent, make sure you go back and you go, this is the reason why. You know, unfortunately, we still have too many companies doing annual kind of feedback appraisals, you know, and you got this, you know, this person in, you know, who's just pitched a great idea, hasn't landed. And what we need, I think, you know, with minorities is better feedback mechanisms, better loops, tell these guys what they're doing well, what they need to improve on. Because otherwise they're always looking around and, you know, the white colleagues are getting promoted, they're getting the good ideas, and they're just going, well, you know what, maybe I'm going to go and work somewhere else. And I think feedback is so important. It's so easy. And, you know, it's just one of the things I encounter with a lot of the mentees I work with, really.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think it's something that a lot of organisations struggle with, that feedback thing. And, you know, we call it catching people doing things right and ensuring that your behaviours don't turn into those microaggressions. So when you're picking a team to work on a pitch, how can you ensure that team is filled with people from lots of different backgrounds? And I actually think one of the things we could all be better of is understanding how to give good and bad feedback, and I don't think we do it enough. And I know it's something I've struggled with in the past, so I couldn't agree with you more. And quite often that can be the most constructive way to drive growth within people. I wonder, have we got time for one more question? Which
Matt's got his hand up.
Go, Goffey.
I was going to say on appraisals, and I can see there's a question about measuring success and impact to the commitments that we're making across the business. Now, if we've got a systemic problem, then we've got to have a systematic response to it. And so one of the things that we're doing is to bake it into people's appraisal, to bake it into everybody's appraisal. How are you contributing to our journey to becoming proactively anti-racist and positively inclusive? Do you understand where you are? Have you shown allyship? Are you willing to learn? Have you attended the training? Like, if we don't, like, it's the job of everybody to go on this journey. We've got to take everybody on it. We've got to give them the tools and the skills and the learning opportunities, but then we've got to measure their progress and their success on it as well. So it will going forwards form part of everybody's appraisal across the whole organization.
And I think also you should put them in people's job specs. So I think for everyone coming into the business, you know, just being an inclusive person should be a part of your role. Like, you know, this is just your bread and butter, is part of everything that you do alongside your BAU tasks at the agency.
Yeah. We expect you to be able to understand the experience from other people.
Yeah, and I love both of those points. I think an understanding as well, if we're baking it into appraisal and performance, an understanding of the behaviours that work against inclusion too, and making sure those are very crystal clear. Because often that feedback point, and I completely agree, but often it puts it as if people of colour are the issue to be solved and are the ones that need the help. And ultimately, by also making it everyone's responsibility, looking at barriers and behaviours that work against inclusion and the things that support it too, I think that's a very robust place for an organisation to be in, and it means that actually that's where we will see the progress.
Yeah, I think the issue is, you know, we've talked on about it, about how difficult it is to get talent in, and you know, and fundamentally it's like, if you guys tried really hard to win a bit of new business, you wouldn't just get the new business and just treat it like everything else, you know. And I think for me, companies need to develop strategies around retention of minorities, you know. And I think you've got to treat people differently. It's not a problem. It's an opportunity, you know. And I think it's so, you know, I always say, you know, to solve this, companies normally focus on two things: profitability and growth, right? That's what I 30 years, profitability. If you've got profitability, growth, diversity, right, and treat that as important as the other two, you'll come up with ways of sorting it.
And also,
companies need to do it.
The McKinsey reports have shown that the impact of diversity, of gender diverse businesses, ethnically diverse businesses, do have on profitability. So it's so linked to the bottom line, as well as it being the right thing to do.
Yeah.
100%. Steph, did you want to just drop in your accountability survey into the notes, or did you want to direct people towards it?
I will do that now. Yeah, just on the accountability piece. So we're talking about how we can ensure that that Adlan does deliver long-term change. We've worked with MIFA for all, a number of other industry networks on a survey. So that launched last week at the CEO Forum, which is for all of the senior leaders that signed up to that letter. And we will be reporting on the results of this at the next CEO Forum with Minister Zahawi for Industry and Business, because he's interested to know, what is Adlan doing to kind of stamp out systemic racism. So I would really encourage you to complete this. I'll just pop this in here.
Thank you, Steph.
So if you could share that with your businesses, encourage your senior leaders to complete that, so we have an overview of kind of where people have got to. And the idea is that it's an annual survey, but we'll be doing quarterly dips to kind of really track progress.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I thought this would always be quite a lively, opinionated session, and it definitely hasn't let me down. And hopefully everybody's got a lot out of everybody's view and opinions and advice today. So thank you very much. I should use your proper name, I've been told off. So I'll say thank you to Matthew Terence Goff for joining us today. I'm not sure where Terence came from either. Thank you, Steph. Thank you,
definitely Inez Matthews, if we're going to go middle names.
No, we shan't. Thank you, Colette, and thank you, Naren. We will be back in a couple of weeks. We've not had a chance to answer all the questions today, so we will be coming back together, and we will be publishing what the topic is and encouraging people to get involved in 2 weeks' day. So see you all soon. Have a good week. Thank you.